You're all very welcome to my county. You're in County Kildare, and you're all hugely welcome to the Flatlands, home of horses, soldiers, sheep, and a football team that hasn't won the All-Ireland since 1928. I know Matt Connor, I see Matt Connor there looking. He'll explain to anyone who doesn't understand how important these things are, the greatest footballer of his generation. A standard answer to how are things in Kildare normally is stable. We are the horsey county. If you came in here, until quite recently, all our celebrities had 4 legs. If you were coming in, you probably saw the horses. Did you see the horses on the way in? You've got on the left-hand side, you've got Vinty, and on the right-hand side, you've got Ninty. Ninty was the greatest horse of the 20th century, won the Triple Crown, the English Triple Crown in flat racing, 1970, established the relationship of a trainer called Vincent O'Brien and a jockey called Lester Piggott. And Vinty was the first Irish horse to win the Melbourne Cup in Australia. So that's how we see things in Kildare. Everything's measured in a lifespan of 3 years and who wins what in that period of time. And I am delighted to be here for the summit because my name is Eoghan Corry. I'm a travel writer. That's what I do. I wander the world at an insane pace. Next Sunday I'm flying to New York overnight, back home, not making it home, off to France. That level of insane. But I'm also, for important here, a brother of Ciarán Corry, who's on your board. And Ciarán's life-changing accident in 1990 means that those of us in the family, when we go abroad, we just have a look at what's there and what the difficulties and the challenges are for people with accessibility issues. I'll name a few of them now, because what we're going to do is we're going to have a round of questions from everybody on the stage where they'll talk about their specialist knowledge, our experience, but we're also going to call out to the floor. We've 2 roving mics. Put your hand up, and we want to get as much input from the floor so that everybody leaves this room with a bigger understanding, not just of what the challenges are, but what is possible. It's all the opportunities that are out there nowadays rather than the challenges. Let's go into the challenges first. What I see is particular problems with aviation, inconsistent policies across airlines, inconsistent policies across aircraft types. Is there an aisle chair available? Is there not? Even on the same airline. Also, I see the inconsistent service in the airports, getting on and off that aircraft. And of course, the big issue, which Ciarán has informed me about over the years, is the damage to wheelchair issue. And maybe we'll have a little look at that and say, what messaging do we need to send out from this event here today to challenge and to take on that issue? So the hotel issue is a completely different set of circumstances. I've seen hotels that have spent money and effort into putting in beautiful accessible bathrooms in their rooms, which you can't actually close the door or you can't get in and out of. So all of those inconsistencies are what we face as a group here in this room, and what we're going to address on stage for the next 30 minutes or so. And hopefully we will come out with a couple of hacks, a couple of ways around it, but more importantly we will get momentum into the big in a day of an information revolution, when information is everything, that we get the level of information that we need to do before we sit down and plan that travel. When you have accessibility issues, planning the travel is the biggest step you're going to take. If we get that wrong, that's where all the difficulties arise. I'm going to bring in for the first, to start our discussion, Eoghan Gorman. And Eoghan is new to travel. We have very experienced travellers. We have a Paralympian here. We have people who organise trips, enable holidays. But Eoghan is coming in with the fresh eye, which is always a wonderful and joyous thing to get. What do you see? Assessing everything that you're looking at and what you're experiencing, what do you see and what do you expect that you want to change?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm very, very early on in the travelling journey, I suppose. I've only been on a plane twice, and one of them flights was domestic. So as far as my travel hours, they're only starting to clock up now. And I think I've seen both ends of the stick. As I've seen two sides to the journey so far, I suppose. Firstly, my flight was to Kerry, the inland domestic. I decided that it would be best off. I wanted to play it safe, I suppose. I wanted to go and test being in the air without going too far or being on a plane chair for too long. So we chose to fly to Kerry, and I chose Ryanair as my option for the travel agent, and I thought I had everything prepared and I thought I was ready and everything was fine, and we got all our bits and bobs that we needed and everything went smoothly. I went into the airport, up to the OCS desk, checked in, no problem. Everything seemed to be going great until I got to the gate, and that's where the problem started. So I was actually very early. I'd say I was half an hour before any crowd. I let the staff know I need assistance. I'll be lifted onto from my chair to the aisle chair. I needed full assistance, and I told them my capacities. It was only at the point of everybody starting to load the plane where I realised, okay, this is going to be an issue. The staff started to look at me like, oh, you're coming onto the plane? Oh, we need to do something now. They were like panicked. And of course, when the person you're dependent on starts to look panicked, I'm going to panic. And it set worry into me and Serge's, my partner's eyes. So we waited to see how things would unfold. The plane started to load, and at the very end, they turned to me and said, we're not going to be able to get you onto this plane. So I questioned why. They said, your chair is too big. And just as a pointer, I want to let everybody know that I wasn't in this chair. I was in one far, far smaller, maybe similar to Jack's beside me, a slightly higher backrest. And they said, your chair's not going to fit. And I said, well, I know people have travelled in the exact same type of chair, so what's the issue? And they just said, oh, it's too big, won't fit. It's not possible. So it was I queried it again and again, and we kind of fought back and dug our heels in and said, this is not right. I know I can travel. I know it's possible because I know people that have similar injuries and similar chairs that can get onto the plane. And fortunately then after a while, magically they could fit the chair onto the plane. But I'd say if I had cowered off or curled over, I wouldn't have went down to Kerry. I wouldn't have found it any way possible. So if I was advising anybody that wants to start off, I'd say you need to be confident and understand that it might not be a smooth sail initially, but if you've ticked all your boxes and learned from other peers, and let's say you've checked all your facts before you arrive at the gate, then sometimes you might end up in a situation where you have a tie off and you say it's not going to be just a welcome on board like everybody else.
You also flew Ryanair.
Ryanair is
which probably, if anyone saw the documentary Tuesday night on Ryanair, the 25-minute turnaround is everything to them. So the staff just look at you and say, there goes our 25-minute turnaround. Mm-hmm. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy for them that people don't fly Ryanair because of the difficulty, the hassle. And it probably takes the pressure off Europe's largest airline to do anything about it.
Yeah. I think they see it as an inconvenience, and they don't treat you like the next passenger. Yeah. Or they see it as like you're saying, a time constraint. This person's going to take an extra 58 minutes. Yeah. So that's not possible.
We'll return to that issue about airline turnarounds because it is a trend in the aviation industry. I can't bring anything about the experience here, but I will talk about the trends in the industry and what I see happening a little bit later. I'm going to bring Jonathan in because you have been at the opposite end of the spectrum. You're widely travelled. Galapagos. I can see you among all those seagulls.
That's next on the list. Can you hear me there? Sorry, that's next on the list, yeah.
Fantastic.
So looking forward to that. Ecuador and the Galapagos in a couple of weeks. So pretty.
Where have you been and what's your experience?
So been quite extensively travelled, I suppose. Been to Japan, Australia, Canada, US, Central America, so Costa Rica. Kind of a good bit throughout Europe, and most recently to Cambodia with Spinal Injuries Ireland. So overall, I've had a bit of everything, like probably the guts of about 200 flights, I'd imagine. I've had all good.
Are we going forwards or are we going backwards in international aviation?
Pretty stagnant, I'd say. I don't think
Stagnant,
changed
nowhere.
much in the course of the last kind of 12 years. But yeah, you got to kind of take the positives and the negatives and kind of push through it, I think, at times. The experience, for the most part, I've found is quite positive. You do have issues like the way that Eoghan was speaking about earlier, but for the most part, I think if you know what you're getting into, you know the turnaround time at Ryanair, you know you're going to be boarded last. You kind of just have to fit that into your schedule.
Great. I'm going to bring Ben in here because you survey all your hotels, check everything out. What are the red flags you'd look out for when you were looking at a hotel, looking at a destination, say, I'm going to bring people here?
Yeah, I think there are quite a few red flags when we're auditing our properties, which is why we extensively audit everything that we sell. There's a lot of hotels that label themselves accessible, but what they term as accessible compared to what accessible is are, poles apart. So
that seems to be a central problem. Anybody can say they're accessible without any certification process and just put it on a brochure.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just, unfortunately, box ticking exercises from hotels and things, and the lack of legislation from local government on what minimum standards are, because minimum standards across Europe are so massively different from one country to another. So for ourselves, we do a 100-point plus audit on all of our properties. So we're not just checking the bathroom, we're not just checking the bedroom, but we're checking the resort, the hotel itself, its accessibility across the board. So we do get bathroom measurements, we do get heights of toilets, heights of beds, space under beds, but we also look at, is the lift wide enough for certain wheelchairs? Is there access to a swimming pool? How high are the buffet restaurant counters? Because obviously sometimes they can be very high or very low. And we look at the whole property or the whole resort itself to find out, is there local restaurants? Are there promenades? Is the beach accessible? All those sort of things that go into a holiday audit.
And coming back into the hotels, what go wrong? What goes wrong? What do hotels get wrong? Let's say I'm talking to hoteliers, which I will be in a couple of weeks' time. What really do they miss? Because a lot of them try hard and get it.
They do try hard, but they're asking the wrong people the questions. They're not seeking advice from wheelchair users, from different people with different mobility disabilities. They're not asking, a varied custom. They're just going, oh, let's make that a flat floor shower. Let's put a grab rail here. Let's put a grab rail there. They're not asking the right people the right questions, in my opinion, because we see so many that try, but it's wasted money because it's wrong.
Right.
So they need to get expert advice. Probably the biggest thing I would say, get people to try it first.
And Ben, what countries are good and what are bad? Where do you find the worst?
To be honest, they're all a very mixed. Obviously, the US is very good because they have a lot of legislation. There's a lot of fines and things in the US if hotels aren't up to standard, so they make sure they are. Spain is doing a great job. I'm actually part of the Spanish advisory board for accessibility, and the Spanish are doing a lot to improve their accessibility across the whole of Spain. So that's very much going in the right direction. And there's a lot of countries getting better. It's still a long way to go.
Bulgaria, Romania?
No. Not that we've audited ourselves. We just don't have the infrastructure.
You don't have a program there, yeah?
Yeah, it's the infrastructure. It's not just the hotel. It's transport locally, excursions, having in-resort reps, having in-resort care options, medical facilities. It's the whole package. It's not just the hotel. you've got to look at the wider scheme of things and see what's, you know, accessible as a whole.
And Philip, the rock star, he's an Olympian, a former Olympian and frequent flyer to Cape Town, Australia. You do long-haul stuff.
Yeah, well, do short and long haul, yeah. I like winter sunshine, so Cape Town. I found a lovely accessible hotel there about 20 years ago, so spent 2 weeks there after Christmas every year. So
Right. The actual journey, though, is that still the biggest hurdle of the travel?
yeah, it's getting the equipment there without being damaged or lost. That's the main challenge. I've had a couple of bad experiences, and I've learned from that now. So air tags are a great thing that I've found.
Oh, great
So
invention.
I
yeah.
air tag my shower.
The
chair.
AirTag, you can find where it is on your phone. So while you're sitting in Cape Town, you can see your wheelchair in Tokyo.
Yeah, but that's not a joke. I was at Chicago for the rugby in November, and my chair was in Reykjavik, so that wasn't ideal.
The chair had a better time than he had.
But no, I learned that from because I have a portable shower chair. Well, actually, not that portable, but my shower chair got lost. So, and that's my toilet stroke shower chair. So, and you're ringing BA, and they've no idea where it is. And my pal, about 3 days later, said, "Look, let's just go to the airport in Cape Town. It might be there now at that stage." And lo and behold, it was. But if I had the AirTag, I would have known straight away.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing now I've learned.
Big difference.
So I've AirTagged everything, yeah.
I obviously not a wheelchair user, but the best accessible onboard aircraft, they're all very tight. They all seem to be difficult. Using that chair, that transfer chair in the aisle can be difficult. But the best one I saw was in the A380, the Emirates A380. Is there any movement forward in accessible toilets? Because otherwise you're not going to the toilet. I don't think the A330 that Aer Lingus flies to America has an accessible toilet. The American carriers, I think, are subject to regulation. But are things getting better in terms of your onboard toiletry?
For me, look, I have a bag. So Jack, you might know more about that, do you?
Jack, yeah.
Yeah, well, hello? Can you hear me?
Can you turn Jack's mic on?
Hello? Oh, we got it. Yeah, so we know that in the States, the regulations have changed, and all narrow-body planes by 2035 have to have an accessible toilet, and you're seeing it coming into the wide-body, and it's really interesting. There's good innovation happening in the different configurations, and, in the wide-body planes, you're seeing configurations where 2 toilets that are side by side can be opened into one larger toilet, where someone can be assisted with an aisle chair, and there's space for someone to assist them as well. Transfer benches and things like that being built in. And I was at the Aircraft Interiors Expo in Hamburg there last year, and some of the biggest innovation is happening in accessible features that are going in cabin.
And while we have you, Aerofix project, you're founder of that, and the idea is to get rid of all this transferring, have suitable spaces on an aircraft that you bring your wheelchair and you're on your own chair. And it solves the getting lost problem as well.
So the first thing I'd want to say to everybody here is, post-spinal cord injury, like everybody loves to travel. Post-spinal cord injury, it can be quite a daunting thing, but travel has been the biggest educator for me, not just for life, but in terms of how to live well with a spinal injury. I will say that travel is the thing that has showcased me and forced me to think outside the box the most. And I'm sure that's been the same for anybody else here. It's taught me how to figure out different types of transfers, the equipment that I really do and I don't need, what I can do with and what I can do without. You pick up all sorts of tips and tricks from the likes of Eoghan in his early days of traveling to the lads that have traveled extensively. For me, last year I took 30 flights, and all sorts of things go right and wrong, and there's certain things you can prepare for and mitigate against. But as you said, I was fortunate to be in a position to found what we call the Aerofix project. It's run for the past 2 years. And the ambition of that project is to enable an end-to-end journey for a wheelchair user without ever leaving their assistive device. So it's possible to travel in your wheelchair on every other form of transport. So by rail, by car, by boat, and so on. back in the 1930s, JFK, or was it Roosevelt, traveled in his wheelchair on Air Force
Roosevelt,
One.
yeah.
And all that's gotten in the way since then is a lack of imagination and regulation and efficiency of space. And so what we've seen in the 2 years is that there is a great appetite for innovation and accessibility. Airbus, Boeing, we have Collins, lots of the big manufacturers
Aerospace,
are innovating in this space. Probably the best solution that we've seen is what's called the Air for All seat, which is going through certification at the moment. And that is, if you think about the type of seat that you would see in a football stadium that can fold up, that's the basic premise of it. So you would go on board, and in about 60 seconds, the seat can be configured from one that you would use, for example, Eoghan, to one that can be flipped up and I can back my wheelchair into, and there's tie-down points to restrain my chair. So these things are in certification. They will happen down the line. There is a push for them, because as you've said, the likes of the Ryanairs and so on with tight turnaround times, it's a nuisance for them at the moment, and it's a very undignified experience for the passenger. And so you want to turn it from a challenge on both sides to a win-win on both sides and make it a more efficient, dignified experience for everybody.
And the power is there because the numbers travelling are enormous, aren't they? It's about 80 million worldwide, I read somewhere, yeah.
Absolutely. So what we see is, this sort of the population of people with all sorts of disabilities, like we're upwardly mobile. And what I mean by that is, it's not that long ago, in the last 60 years, that people were sidelined, institutionalized, not in the workforce and so on. And so much has changed with sort of human rights and people with disabilities becoming upwardly mobile. We're educated, we're in the workforce, we're living really full and engaged lives now, and traveling for not just pleasure but for work as well. And so the pressure is increasing on the airlines because as a passenger demographic, those with disabilities that are traveling, it's continuing to increase and we're not going away.
Yeah.
And so either they work with us and this becomes a win-win, or we continue to have these friction points over time.
It's interesting you mentioned Roosevelt because it did change perceptions in America having the president in a wheelchair, but the publicity people at the time didn't allow him to be seen in a wheelchair. Sort of an agreement among the media that his photographs would all be chest up or waist up, and but it did spur things on. It's something I never thought about till you just talked. Patiently waiting to come in is Jennifer. Jennifer, you experienced the spinal injuries trip, which has become a bit of a... People used to go on pilgrimages to Lourdes and places like this. This seems like a much more bacchanalian pilgrimage and great fun. Tell me about your experience.
Yeah, I've been on almost all of the Spinal Injuries Ireland accessible trips, I think maybe bar one. The first one I went on, we sailed a tall ship from Cork to Poole in the UK.
Sounds like fun.
It was an experience. The seas were choppy, the winds weren't, the weather wasn't great, but it was absolutely fantastic. So good that I signed up for the next one. The next one we sailed from Poole in the UK back to Dublin, which was brilliant. We sailed all around the south of England, past the cliffs of Dover. We anchored off Penzance, and so it was fabulous.
The Pirates of Penzance.
Yeah, the Pirates of Penzance. The next voyage we went on then was a little bit warmer to the Caribbean. So we sailed around Antigua and Guadeloupe, and that was unbelievable. It was just amazing. Then we ventured off to Costa Rica, and in Costa Rica, I did things there that I never thought I'd do, never mind do as a wheelchair user. We were surfing in the Pacific Ocean. We like trekking through rainforests. It was brilliant. But all very, very different trips, but all equally as brilliant.
And you'd recommend it highly because all the worrying is done in advance by somebody else about sorting out access and everything.
Oh, I'd recommend it to anyone to go on any of the trips. It really like opens your eyes to, like, it just focuses on our abilities, not our disabilities, on what we're able to do. Everybody's there cheering each other on, you know, and it's just like, I climbed up to the mast, you can see on my picture there, like, and when I got up there, I kind of went, oh, now I have to get back down. But everyone's there helping each other, and it's amazing. It's
Our
amazing
very own
experience.
pirate of Penzance, thank you. We've sailed 7 seas, 6 of the 7 seas. Observations from our MC.
Observations from.
What are your observations and what you've heard and what your experience?
Yeah,
and what needs to
I mean,
change?
it's funny. I when I'm going through airports, myself and my wife, and now we have a little fella as well, and that's added all sorts of other complications to travel for us, for sure. But like I still notice, we still call out, because I spent a couple of years in a wheelchair before I gained back some power to walk again, which I'm very grateful for. Obviously, but I still notice the issues when I'm going through airports. Little things like I was taking notes before. I've done.
I saw you writing furiously, so fasten your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen.
No, I was. I would agree. I would agree with some of the other speakers there in regards to Spain. Ben was saying we went to Fuerteventura and Tenerife, and I found them absolutely fantastic places to navigate around. And then obviously I did a schoolboy error and went to Lisbon and Rome and had the exact opposite. They were terrible places to go because it was cobblestone paths, high hills, like cracks all over the place. But before you get to those destinations, and I wanted to come back to something that Jack was mentioning, even little things like bins in toilets. Like I've noticed in some airports that they don't actually keep bins in toilets anymore because of potential bomb scares and things like that. But actually, as someone who catheterizes, like, I don't want to carry that onto the plane with me. I want to dispose of that material before I get on. So even little things like get the bins back in the toilets, for goodness sake, you know. And then obviously as a walker, I sometimes won't go to the wheelchair hubs to get a wheelchair from the entrance of the airport to the gate. I was told recently by someone who works in Dublin Airport that it's a kilometre from the entrance of Dublin Airport to your boarding gate at Ryanair, and that's a long time to walk if you're a slow and you know, you're a slower walker and muscles are like you've had your.
It's a long time to walk.
You're already
anyway,
wrecked by the time you're getting on the plane. So
gate 126. Yeah,
I sometimes find that like Dublin Airport. Paris and other places actually were so much better, but Dublin, if you're not in the chair going from entrance to gate, they won't streamline you into another queue to, you know, if you're on a cane, you'll wait like everybody else, and you know, little things like that could be very helpful. And one thing I wanted to come back and ask Jack about was adapted vehicles abroad. What's your experience being with adapted vehicles? Because I know that we all have different capacities and we all need different adaptations for vehicles. But is that even an option? I haven't actually looked this up because I just feel that it doesn't exist when I get to
really important
Spain
question.
Or anywhere.
Jack, renting your adopted vehicle abroad, little surprises along the way?
So in terms of adapted vehicle, like I tend to look for ramp access when I can get one, just to make things easy. I found the likes of the Canaries fantastic.
Oh, really?
Only that you might get a ramp up into the back of the van and be told to hold on.
Right.
I think so you want to be on for the adventure of it, but I do think it varies country to country. I know in Italy, I certainly was able to get accessible transportation, but in Rome I was charged an arm and a leg for it, you know, and there can be a bit of a disability tax sometimes.
Disability tax, always.
I think, you know, if you've got the capacity to transfer into a car or have an assisted transfer, that makes a world of difference in terms of your options are much wider. But generally I found when ramped access hasn't been available, people are happy to assist, you know, when and where it's required. And I even had a few taxi drivers that just picked me up and put me into jeeps and stuff. And if you're open to it, you might need to slack off on some of the burgers for a while to allow that happen. But if you're open to that kind of a thing, people generally are open to helping.
Okay.
Have you flown Ryanair?
How have I flown? It's kind of unavoidable.
Yeah.
I've flown Ryanair, and look, a couple of things.
43% of the flights on and off the island are Ryanair, but you're absolutely right. It's very hard to avoid them.
It's hard to avoid it, and I think a couple of things. You need to manage your expectations. Is the first thing. If you're flying Ryanair, you know what you're getting, and particularly if you've got a mobility impairment, you will be the last to board with Ryanair, and that I think plays big time into the indignity, I think, of traveling. You know, when and where possible, boarding first makes everything so much simpler. You've got a bit of time. There's nobody sort of watching. You've got the freedom to move in an empty cabin. I will say that boarding last at the back of the plane does make you kind of feel like an afterthought.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of eyeballs on you, but you've got just as much of a right to be on the plane as anyone else.
Birmingham, Alabama, 1954.
You know?
That's great.
And so that turnaround time is the thing that
It's the
kills
king,
it, though,
the turnaround time. And the problem with the Ryanair started it with the 25 minutes, or started in Europe, but all the other airlines are trying to emulate it. And a pilgrimage flight, I know, with a lot of disabled, would take 4 hours of a turnaround. And airlines factor that in then to the cost. So charter airlines by Joe Walsh Tours or whatever are charging exorbitant amounts because that has to be factored in. I'm going to call for questions from the floor. Put your hands up. We've 2 roving mics. I'm going to bring Philip back into the equation here. Cape Town, do you fly down, flying into Africa, you probably don't expect the same, whatever about the flight experience, the same experience in hotels and in lodges and things like that when you get there.
Yeah, luckily I found an accessible hotel, and you know, I think that's what happens when you find a good place. You'll always go back there.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm fond of my food and my wine and nice weather, so that's why I've ended up going there.
What a way to spend a rainy winter out of Ireland.
Yeah, absolutely. Recommended for anyone.
We have a question here somewhere in the...
Hi. It's not really a question. It's actually, I can add to...
An observation.
An observation to Ciarán's question about travel. I have a disability now nearly 38 years. I've travelled extensively as well. And I have travelled to various countries where I've had to hire a vehicle. In the United States, it's straightforward, and that's through the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, that if you give the rental car company advance notice, they have to provide a vehicle with hand controls, right? That's the first thing. You can also purchase a set of portable hand controls. I'm not too sure. Many people don't know that. Now, they don't suit everybody, so that's just a word of caution. And if you travel to the UK, the company that makes those portable hand controls, they have a deal with Enterprise Rental Car, so you can book and pay for a normal car, a stick shift, and they will give you a free upgrade to an automatic with these portable hand controls. But a word of caution, you have to learn how, or you have to have some experience in using them, but it's pretty okay.
There was a question here about the difference in adoptive standards across countries. So presumably Ireland and UK would not be that different.
It's more about the type of hand control that different people need, depending on hand function. I will add one other observation as well, and it's more a general thing. I think for anybody with a mobility challenge that's traveling, I think you have to really be your own advocate in terms of dealing with the airline when you're booking, but also when you arrive at the airport. and really it's, people will say no, as Eoghan mentioned, his experience. You have to be your strongest advocate. And I think you also have to be prepared. So, in other words, the details, the dimensions, the weight of your chair. If you're traveling with an attachment, know the details about the battery, the weight of that, and have that stored so that when you meet somebody at the desk that says no, you can challenge them with the facts.
Yeah. Very, very strong point. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For that. I'm going to bring Eoghan back in again. On domestic, and you've talked about your air experience. What's been your experience new to travel domestic, going away in Ireland?
Yeah, so I found it was a really good first start for anybody that would be cautious or worried about the idea of just sitting on the plane for the first time since you're in a wheelchair or you've newly acquired your disability. It's a way of knowing that the place you land is home, for starters. So there won't be a language barrier. There'll be a short flight as well when you're going to the likes of Kerry. You've got 20 minutes in the air. Let's be realistic. So I think it's a really good start for somebody that's planning to get back in the air. Let's say, for example, it gives you that bit of security and that extra bit of, I suppose, takes out a lot of variables if you'd like to say it like that.
I have a question here from the middle aisle again. Yeah.
Ciarán, Jack, or Ciarán as well, yeah.
I've lost track of where the question is, but whoever has the microphone, we can. We have it here. Yeah, it's great.
Just one point, an observation, as you put it on, and that is that by comparison with the airline travel, the people on the boats, on the ferries, tend to be fantastically helpful. Mm-hmm. And so it's much more expensive, so the disability tax applies, but it is a far more comfortable way to travel. So I'd make that point. But the real question I have, and it's particularly, I think, for Ben, is one of the problems I've encountered is in hotels, be it in Ireland or abroad, even in the accessible rooms, the mattresses occasionally can be very soft. And so you transfer or hoist yourself in, and then you find getting back out of it.
You disappear into
the folds, and it's all boasting of a great sound, nice sleep and a good feather bed pillow. But that's all very good if you can't get out of it to have your breakfast in the morning. And the other issue about beds that I've found is that I tend to bring my own hoist. So to get out of the hoist, you want to get the legs underneath the bed. And so many beds nowadays, including in the accessible rooms, have drawers underneath the bed so you can't get in. And I found myself propping up the end of the bed with a couple of trashy novels to try and make room. And of course, it's very precarious. We've had a laugh doing it, but some fine day, one of the books is going to collapse under me, and that'll be the end of that. And I wonder, when you talk about regulation, has that factored into your thinking in any way at all? Okay,
thank you. I won't even ask you what authors, your favourite authors for the trashy novels are for
It's what's ever available in reception.
Ben, I'll bring you in here. Is that something that a hotelier would probably never think about?
Yeah, it's something that they don't think about, because it's part of our audit is to check the space under the bed to make sure there's enough space for a hoist to be used in the accessible bedroom on all of our audits, so we can then tell you as the customer, this hotel room's not going to be suitable, but this one is. I think with hotels, when they're doing a lot of them, even the last 12 months, we've had a lot of hotels that had beds with space under and had, average heights. They've all done refurbishments with divan beds because they might look nicer or they might have this, might that. Don't take the practicality of them into consideration, because again, when they're doing refurbishments, they're not speaking to the right people. They're not even thinking, actually, does this work or doesn't this work? So with part of our audit, we'll be able to tell you that information as to what hotels have the space under the beds and what don't, what accept hoists and what don't. But as a general rule for hotels, they should be thinking about it from that perspective. It's advice we give them before any of them do refurbishments. However, whether they take that advice on board, and again, there isn't a legislation to state you need to have this. And I think that's what we've always pushed for the UK and European, is to have a standard or a minimum standard that, you know, that everyone has to adhere to, because the standards are so, you know, different everywhere that you can't.
I would have thought Brussels would have stepped in and said, this is one for all 27 countries.
I mean, we should by now have, you know, standardisation across the board for whether it's air travel, whether it's hotels, whether it's just tourism in general, because you know, some countries are better at it than others.
And is that the advocacy is not loud enough, or what's going on there?
We find from what we're lobbying for with things like accessible seating on aircrafts and standardisation across, you know, resorts and hotels, is people don't want to put their head above the parapet and say, actually, yes, we need to do that. People in government hide behind, oh, we're too busy, we've got other things to worry about,
Right.
we haven't got that and this.
So it needs to be louder.
Yeah, we need to be louder, but we need to have more people with more power to support it, because, you know, you can only shout so loud.
We need more MEPs and TDs and wheelchairs like Brian and the sad Brian and Cork. Bring the question in here from the left.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Just to follow up on that issue about the beds. We took our son Matthew last week to England, and we booked in one of the accessible rooms in the large hotel. And I phoned up the week before to check the height of the bed, and I was told it was 140 mil because they didn't have a hoist. We had our own hoist. Of course, when we got to the room, the bed was flat to the floor. So there is a lot of education to go on in that area. Secondly, we travel a lot to South Africa. So obviously we're in transit quite a bit. And a couple of things that we have learned over the years is that we have to educate those who are behind the desk and those who are at the check-in to make sure that the chair is properly tagged. Because very often you get to the door, you're in transit, and you're waiting for the chair to come back up, but the chair has gone to its final destination. So there should be something in terms of the airlines educating their staff as to how to deal with wheelchairs and how to tag them to make sure that you get them where you want them. And one tip I was given was that when you're getting off the aircraft and you're waiting for the chair, do not get off the aircraft onto the air bridge. Because once you are off the aircraft, you are not the responsibility of the airline anymore. So always stay on the airline until such time as the chair comes. Never get off, because the staff can't leave until you're off.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because when my trip to Chicago, so my chair, about an hour and a half layover, which is pretty tight, and so my chair was tagged to the to Reykjavik airport, and then when I got off, the flight was delayed a little bit, so they said, do you mind if we put you in an airport chair just to get from one air bridge to the other, because the planes were right beside each other. And I said, as long as my chair goes on the other flight, but my chair was tagged to Reykjavik. So they saw that. I got off the plane onto an airport chair. They brought me to the other plane. I got on the other plane thinking my chair would be brought onto the other plane, but it was tagged to Reykjavik. So I shouldn't have got off. If I'd known that, I shouldn't have got off the plane.
Well, great tip. Thank you so much. Have you finished yet?
And just one thing on the, you can avoid using your books because you can buy elephant legs.
Yeah.
You can buy them online. They're 4 strong pieces of plastic that can go under the corners of beds. So your novels may not be damaged in the future.
So that's straight from the elephant's mouth from South Africa. Thank you very much for being a great audience. We've heard, at the risk of sounding like Bono, what I'm hearing is information, education, and of course, we shall not be moved. Stay on the aircraft. Let Michael O'Leary worry about it if you're still on the aircraft 4 hours later and you still haven't got your chair. Thank you so much. I mean, all of my panel here and all of the audience, indeed. I've learned a hell of a lot. Thank you so much. The second part of the Ryanair documentary is on Tuesday night if you want to see me in my day job and you want to learn more about what the airline does to people. But thank you very much and have a great, I think we have another session before lunch and then we're on our way. Okay, thank you very much.